Hello and welcome to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with my co-host, my partner in shine,
DC Marshall. Hey.
And you know, this is a show about faith, finance, abundant living, and today we have a great topic. We're going to be talking about the difference between rich and wealthy and what the power of thought has to do with that question. What is real wealth and how can one achieve it? What say you, D? I mean, we
I'm excited.
A lot of time talking about this in our work lives and in our personal lives.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the content, and also because we have a special guest, so I'm super excited about this. I love to hear from thought leaders and just different views on wealth. I think in our community, people are talking about money and hustle and business, but I love this conversation today on the power of thought as it pertains to like real wealth. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be a great conversation because there is a certain degree of, I'll say, conflict often in faith-based communities about where we should stand in terms of our mindset toward pursuing wealth. And so, I think it's going to be a great show. Listen, it's Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. Stay tuned. We will be right back. It's Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And our topic today is what is real wealth and how can we achieve it? And we're going to be talking about the power of thought. And we have a great guest, actually the perfect guest. And if I sound like I'm a big fan, it's because I've known him a long time. I've benefited from reading his books. We've been spoken together at conferences. I've been in the audience for his speeches at conferences. We go back a long way. But when you talk about the study of wealth, understanding real wealth, and again, this is Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life, and we're talking about faith and finance. You can't have a more studied, knowledgeable, passionate expert on this topic than our guest today, Dr. Dennis Kimbro. Dr. Kimbro, I'm just so glad you could join us for
Alfred, thank you very much, man. Thank you very much for having me. How's everything well, you're not in Detroit, you're still probably in Jersey, right?
Still in Jersey, New York, Jersey, however you want to call it, but you got to say it's all good. It really is very, very, I have nothing to complain about.
Good. It's great to be with you. And this is such a much needed topic today. It seems like we're on the verge of a recession, but I'm not claiming it. And it seems like we're on the verge of so many other negative issues, and I'm not claiming. What was interesting, I get hit up with DMs, social media all the time. Excuse me. Folks want to know the answer to questions, this and that. Well, I got a great message sent to me by a young man, much younger than me, and he just bought my first book, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And I tried to explain to him that, the book is 30 years old, man. And he said, I can't believe I'm just now reading it. And my response was, well, when the teacher is ready, the student will appear.
Yes.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
And it's timeless. I got to tell you, it's timeless. I bought a copy for at least two people in the past year. I didn't tell them when it was written. I just said, you can read it.
And Alfred, to drive the point home even further, he never heard of Napoleon Hill. And that was a great way for me to segue into everything that maybe we might discuss, in terms of finance and abundance and leading a successful life. And I said to him, I replied back, and I'm typing and sending my message back to him. I'm saying, you may not have heard or read Napoleon Hill, but you certainly heard or know of his writings. Yeah. And he said, what do you mean, Dr. Kimbro? And I said, well, you probably heard the quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe can achieve. He said, yeah, I heard that. I said, well, that was Napoleon Hill in the late 20s. I said to him, have you ever heard of the law of attraction? He said, yes, I heard the law of attraction. I said, Napoleon Hill introduced that in 1919.
Yes.
How about the quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself? And he said, yeah. I said, well, Napoleon Hill, when he was a speechwriter for FDR, he wrote that for FDR. And I said, how about the financial literacy concept of pay yourself first? And he said, sure, I heard that. And I said, well, Napoleon Hill introduced that in Think and Grow Rich. And to drive the point home even further, I said, now expand that quote when he says, pay yourself first. He says, it's not what you do for your money, but what you do with your money that is infinitely important. So
that's a perfect thought, Dr. Kimbro, to do a couple things. You're really kind of laying the groundwork for what we'll be discussing during the course of the show. But also, you know, speaking of people didn't know who Napoleon Hill is, I don't want to assume that everybody understands who Dr. Dennis Kimbro is. So just tell a little bit about your story, your journey, how you ended up writing books like Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice, writing my favorite. I have a soft spot for Think and Grow Rich because it was my first one, but The Wealth Choice, I literally, again, just gave another copy of The Wealth Choice to one of my friends to read. But let's make sure our audience understands, you know, who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Well, that's a great question, Alfred. I'm not a unicorn. If there's any unicorn among us, it would certainly be W.B. Du Bois. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I've been at this game for a while, and I've had so many interesting milestones in my life where I tell people I really didn't find my calling. I think it was more of my calling, you know, finding me. Because when I made the decision that I wanted to study wealth and prosperity and financial gain and this, that, and everything, millionaireship among African Americans, it was almost like the pieces were added to me. Case in point, a couple of items. When I was at Northwestern, I read a book, and I heard of a book, and then I got it and I read it, called The Achieving Society. Now, this book was written in 1961 by a gentleman, actually a professor who taught at Harvard for 25 years, David McClellan. And David McClellan said in that book, he said, every generation, and I don't care who the generation, the people, the race, the ethnicity, whatever, but every race, every generation has someone to chronicle success for future generations. In other words, to show them the norms, the mores, the traits, the qualities, you know, the breadcrumbs in the forest for future generations. So I checked that box and I thought about it. Then when I took another step forward in terms of, you know, studying, taking a deep dive into wealth and prosperity among African Americans, and I shared this story with you before of how I read that old issue by cosmic happenstance of Time magazine when they discussed those 5 Black millionaires who were on the scene when Martin Luther King led the Montgomery bus boycott. So when you galvanize all those different factors together, I said somebody or something is trying to talk to me. And I tell my students all the time, the future is for sale. And they look at me like I'm crazy. That's what do you mean? No, the future is up for grabs. Every dollar bill in the universe, outside of the construct of this podcast, is up for grabs right now. And you better go ahead and hurry up and purchase the future before somebody else does. Now, how in the world do you purchase the future? What we said in terms of law of attraction and think and grow rich. It's how you think. It's what you believe. It's what you subscribe to. It's your personal outlook on life. And it's open and up for grabs for anybody and anywhere. So getting back to Napoleon Hill and getting back to, you know, all the different milestones in my life, you pull it all together. This has been the bottom line of what I've done and why I've done it.
And the thing is, I mean, I want our audience to be clear about all the different platforms. Of course, we know Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. We mentioned The Wealth Choice. I'll be remiss if I didn't mention What Makes the Great Great. So just great, powerful books that if you're serious about faith and finance and the listeners of our show, that's why they're here. You gotta read those books. But you mentioned your students. You have been a long-time business school professor at Clark Atlanta University, and again, use Black Enterprise in the classroom. I'm one of the many Black Enterprise editors who had the privilege of being brought in to speak to your class, and I can't wait to come back.
Oh yeah.
Over. But you have really, and again, that's why you're perfect for this show. And and I want to kind of say this before we get to the wrap and get to the next segment. That you have really built your whole. It's not enough to say you're an author, you're a professor. You have really become the leading educator of what it means and the habits and the lifestyles necessary to produce wealthy outcomes. And on this show, we do differentiate between rich and wealthy. And I always tell people, if it's not multi-generational, it's not wealth, which is why you said about every generation has somebody to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to hold that thought. Listen, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with my co-host, DC Marshall. This is Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And we are here in the presence of the one, the only, Dr. Dennis Kimbro. Sit tight with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., and our co-host DC Marshall will be joining us shortly. Listen, we are here with Dr. Dennis Kimbro. If you don't know, now you know, the leading educator on what it means to have wealth, build wealth, pursue healthy lifestyles. And we're here talking today about answering the question, one, what is real wealth and how can one achieve it? But even more to the point, Dr. Kimbro, we're talking about the power of thought. Because what you've been really divining is not the stuff that us financial journalists talk about. Oh, there's credit, there's debt, there's stocks, there's bonds, there's mutual funds. You're talking about what's the thought process of successful wealth creators. And you've documented that this thought process is consistent across race, across gender, across economic status, that there are certain things that's common in terms of what constitutes powerful thinking when it comes to wealth creation. And of course, for the purpose of this show, God gave us all the capacity to create wealth, but you really have distilled over time, like you said, those choices, the thought process, the lifestyle that produces that result, particularly as we focus on Black wealth creators. Talk to me about first of all, your thought process for writing Think and Grow Rich, a Black choice. Again, Napoleon Hill, the original Think and Grow Rich, obviously, communicates those same values, but there was a desire and a recognition of a need to cast that value system, if you will, and target it to a Black audience. Talk about how that came about.
Without a doubt, Alfred. And when I said I read David McClellan, I read the other books also. I read George Clason, Richest Man in Babylon. I read Andrew Carnegie, The Gospel of Wealth. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, Samuel Smiles, Self-Help, and on and on and on and on and on. And obviously there was a gap when it came to Black America, but what did these books have in common? And again, Alfred, you got to understand, I was walking a literal tightrope, trying to hold on and trying to abide by and make sure I satisfied the pedagogy, the behavioral, the academic rigor and demands of Northwestern for something that the average person on the street would read. And I was walking that tightrope and I just knew, I said, well, I can't do, and people ask me all the time, what's the difference between Think and Grow Rich, a Black choice and the wealth choice? Well, they're both qualitative in one respect, but thank God the wealth choice is a little bit more quantitative. I'll never forget when I turned to my wife and I had all these interviews, surveys that they had checked, and I had my daughter collate the data for me. And can you believe this, Alfred? Now, I sent this child Spelman College, as I did with all three of my daughters. No student loans, no nothing, everything's paid for. Took care of her MBA. And I said, I said, you want the doctorate? You pay for the doctorate yourself. I paid enough for your education. And Alfred, she charged me to collate my data. I said, girl, I said, forget going to heaven. You ain't going to heaven.
You might have taught her too much about wealth creation.
She said, Dad, man, there are 118 questions wrong. You know how long then you got 50 million surveys, man. Well, anyway, I turned to my wife and I said, Pat, can you believe I can perform multiple regression? She said, you are such a nerd. Anyway, so I knew what I had to do. But what did they all have in common? The books that I listened to you, they all, that one common core, you become what you think about. It was the thought process. You couldn't escape it. So that certainly that gave me a track to run on. Man, if I can just get African Americans who believed in that. Well, this was one of the turning points. Okay, I told you I had interviewed 4 of the 5, and the other one who had made his transition, Charles Clinton Spalding, I went up there. But when I went to Baltimore and I spent a day with Henry Parks of Parks Sausage, he started the interview off because, Alfred, at that time, my finances were getting to be a little bit shaky, man. I was trying to keep bill collectors away from my door because I spent all the money and this, that, and everything. And so I was, man, I got to wrap this up. I got to get a financial blessing from somebody. And I don't know if Mr. Parks could see it in my demeanor or whatever, but we were talking about mindset. And when he said to me, he said, young man, he said, in one hand, I have a dream. In the other hand, I have an obstacle. Which one grabs your attention? And I could tell where he was driving with this, that nothing happens by accident. You are already on the path to wealth. And he said to me, the only question is, will you be around to collect it? And there is no wealth without a wealth consciousness. And so that certainly, bolstered, my confidence and gave me the energy and desire to keep going forward. So at that point, I knew that, I said this whole process of wealth could be like 5 steps on it. Number 1, a career is what you pay for, but a calling is what you're made for. Sooner or later, you got to answer the question, what have you been called to do? We no longer live in a society that asks, what do you want to be when you grow up? Hell to the no. We live in a society right now, a creator's economy, the future of work economy, that is, what have you been called to do? What have you been born to do? What problem have you been born to solve? And that's the hallmark to wealth. A problem to profitable. You take a mechanism, combine it with a method, and then find a model. Somebody that maybe's done what you've done, or somebody that can help you along the way. So that's the big difference. And there's whole aura of abundance. Now, Napoleon Hill wrote 16 books. Just like you were mentioning, you said, what makes a great, one of your favorites? Well, I have a favorite of Napoleon Hill, and it certainly isn't Law to Success, and it certainly isn't Think and Grow Rich. It's The Master Key to Riches. It was his next to last book that he wrote. Now, why is that number 1 on the per chart with me? Because he finally comes clean. He finally tells all of his readers. Now, his first book, Law of Success, was really the regurgitation of Andrew Carnegie. I mean, Carnegie set up all the interviews, 500 interviews of all the successful men. I got to underline and highlight men, and not just any men, but white men. 500 of the baddest and brightest on that particular side of the fence. And it's really a regurgitation of everything that Carnegie taught him. But from Law of Success all the way to his last writings, which Think and Grow Rich, a Black Choice, he was influenced by so many folks. He was influenced by so many metaphysical writers and this and that, that he really, really wrapped his mind around what is true wealth and abundance. And according to Hill, it's a 6-pointed star. And top of the list is peace of mind. I mean, there are 10 different forms of wealth. 10 different forms of wealth. And money is only one of them, Alfred. And money isn't even number one. The number one form of wealth is knowledge. I tell my students all the time, you're already wealthy. You already, and you know, we're dealing with Generation Z. So they all had, Dr. I'm after the bag and this, that. Well, I'm glad you know that you're after the bag. And you don't have to listen to me. You may grab the bag and you may be a millionaire, but you won't keep your millions until you know the true form of wealth, which is knowledge.
You know, Dr. Kimbro, you just bring to mind certain scriptures like, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Yes.
You know, that, you know, people without a vision, people perish.
Without a doubt.
Really, you're talking about if you don't see things a certain way,
yep,
the outcomes won't come out, no matter what your desire or your intentions are.
Yep.
How you think and how you see things will dictate the outcome. And you're right. If
and
you
that's Albert Einstein. You know what I mean? You can't solve the problem with the same mindset that created it. So
yeah,
you've got a mindset that you look around and you're impoverished and lack and oh, whoa, you know what I mean? You got to change, you got to flip the script altogether.
Well, listen, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we want to talk about these other forms of wealth in addition to money and why understanding what they are is so important as we talk about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. You're listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And you're listening to Dr. Dennis Kimbro. We will be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life, where we're talking to the one and only Dr. Dennis Kimbro. You definitely want to get his books. You want it. I mean, I'd say get all his books, but definitely Think and Grow Rich, a Black Choice. Yeah, it's a 30-year-old masterpiece, but it's a timeless masterpiece. My personal favorite is The Wealth Choice, one of the more recent books. But by the way, follow Dr. Kimbro on Instagram. Trust me, you will not regret it. He's dropping jewels and gems every day. But listen, Dr. Kimbro, as we get back into the conversation about rich versus wealthy and the power of our thoughts, you highlighted in the previous segment that there are actually 10 forms of wealth, and money is only one of them, and it's not even the number one. Why don't you walk through during this segment, you know, these other forms of wealth and how that relates to building wealth in general?
Yeah, like I said, knowledge. In other words, in terms of wealth, you're not going to develop wealth until you develop a wealth consciousness. Prosperity begins in the mind, but ends in the purse. So when we talk about changing your thinking, mindset is by far your greatest resource. Number two is your work habits. I mean, Alfred, the average, I had a video on quiet quitting. And I tell my students, man, I said, the average work week right now is about 37.5 hours per week. But the average executive, the average entrepreneur, the average millionaire, all right, works more than 72 to 75 hours a week. But it's really not work, Alfred. Why? Because you're completely engaged. When you are engaged of your labor of love, you forget about time, you forget about your resources, the lack thereof, you forget everything except the task at hand, what you were truly engaged in. So if you can do anything, it's your work habits. Same individual that's on the street corner with a cardboard sign saying, I'll work for food, has the same opportunity of a Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, an Oprah Winfrey. Why? Because anybody can work and anybody can wow the customer and anybody can do more than what is expected and more than what is required. Number three, I told you, which is money.
Dr. Kimbro, if I could just stick a point in this whole equation between work ethic and the time you put into doing the work. One of the biggest revelations I got out of reading The Wealth Choice was, and I can't remember which of the people you interviewed made this point, wealth creation is not just working harder to make more money, it's also making more money per hour in less time, meaning that's how, you know, so I found that when you're truly engaged, not only does it matter how much time you spend doing something, you actually will get more done in a given hour of being fully engaged than someone who's not engaged will get done in that same hour. So even if you hold time as a constant, that full engagement, that responding to your calling, that responding with the right mindset, you will produce $10 in the same amount of time that somebody's doing the exact same thing can only produce one.
Yeah, and that's the shift from your gift to your talent. Everybody's got a gift, but it doesn't become a talent until you work on it. Okay, so Michael Jordan, what was his gift? Well, his gift was persistence. Why? Because you probably go back when he was a young boy and he threw up that first basketball shot and he probably didn't hit. He even says in his biography, he said that about 500,000 shots that I never made, man. But he took that gift that he had, which is really more persistence than basketball, to keep going, to keep going, to keep going, to keep going. And when you get to the talent level, that's when people want to join your caravan. That's when people want to jump on your wagon. That's when people will follow you. When you made the gift from talent. Saw it yesterday, man. Aaron Judge, man. Aaron Judge, oh my goodness, he has a fantastic story. And God bless the baseball coach who had the presence of mind when he saw Aaron Judge in his complete football uniform, because he was going to practice at Fresno State. He saw him with the pads on and blah, blah, blah. And he said, man, what position do you play? And he says, I'm a tight end, defensive end. He said, man, you ever play baseball? No, I'm not a big. He said, why don't you just come by practice? I just want to throw a couple of balls to you. And when he saw how far this guy who never practiced can hit that ball, he said, man, I think you might have a gift for it. If you work at it, it might one day become a talent. Well, I say he's talented at hitting 95-mile-an-hour baseball with 62 in his bag right now. So yeah, that's what we have to, that's where you've got to be. So, understanding what is your gift. And the gift can be explained 50 million different ways. And you heard me say this before, Alfred, your area of excellence now. Yes. People will be added to you if you need people. Resources will be added to you if you need resources. And that's what capitalism wants. They want that disruptor. They want that differentiator. They want that wow factor. And I don't care whether, it's called top of mind status. When you get to that level, just like Black Enterprise, Earl Graves had top of mind status. Why? He was the only Black magazine that was focusing on business and entrepreneurship and corporate climbers who hit their peak and the like. And when you got top of mind status, it's like a magnet, man. People will be drawn onto you. And two items you never have to worry about. You never have to worry about income, and you never have to worry about customers. And that's where and still to this day, where Black Enterprise is.
You know, Dr. Kimbro, you make that point. I tell the entrepreneurs that I mentor, if you're chasing money, that's one thing. But you're doing it right. You're answering your call and you're fulfilling a real need when money, resources starts chasing you. That you got to figure out what to say no to. You got to say, no, I don't need that. I don't want that. Because now, like you said, people are ready to jump on. Give me a couple of other things on your list of forms.
Well, I like, of course, I like number 10. And number 10 is confidence and charisma. What did Maynard Jackson said? I was sharing the other day. I said, in terms of my most admired list, and you can imagine what my most admired list looks like, none comes higher than Maynard Jackson. And again, I'm repeating myself because I know some of these stories I shared. And when I asked Maynard Jackson for the interview, I showed my project to his team and they liked it. And Maynard, just a different animal altogether. And I still somewhat contrite calling him Maynard. I said, Mr. Mayor, he said, I'll tell you what, Dennis, I said, don't interview me. I said, no, Mr. Mayor, I got to interview you, man. This book will be empty without your story. He said, no, don't interview me. Shadow me through City Hall for 1 week. And that's what I did. And again, just like Henry Parks, Alfred, I was dead broke and I had one suit to my name. That suit had been to the tailor so many times because I had so many holes in that suit. And he saw me in City Hall one day and he said, Dennis, when are you going to finish that suit? And I said, what do you mean finish the suit? He said, will you please put a pocket handkerchief in that jacket. And I said, Mr. Mayor, why is that so important? He says, when you look the part, act the part, walk the part, talk the part, think the part, guess what? You get the part. Confidence and charisma. Now, in terms of dress for success in corporate America, they may not call that confidence and charisma. What do they call it? They call it executive presence.
Yes, yes.
Executive presence, occupying the place that you fill. And when you wrap all of them together, there's a big difference between being a millionaire and becoming a millionaire. Just like when Warren Buffett told Jay-Z, again, going back to my students, I said, I can tell you to go ahead and purchase a suit. And men, just not buying the suit, but buy a suit that fits. Buy a suit in which you can wear it real well. Do you want me to tell you to purchase a suit? Or do you want to fall in the same trap that Jay-Z and Biggie Small fell in when they met Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett told them, he says, the reason why you guys are blocked out of so many potential deals is because we're gonna deal with you the way that we perceive you.
Yes.
You keep walking in here with, those white t-shirts and baggy jeans, no one's gonna give you the time of day. And it was at that point that Jay-Z said, man, let me go get a tailor. Let me change the narrative on this altogether, where people will respect me as soon as my hand hits that doorknob.
And fast forward, Jay-Z, billionaire. So, your point is, those are great examples. I mean, we had Jay-Z on the cover of Black Enterprise back when they were still in the t-shirt and jeans days. And you see how far he's come. But listen, I want to bring you back. We're going to continue this conversation. But I really want to spend the remaining time we have with you giving your advice to a faith community, our audience will be lifted up, about what they need to be thinking about and doing if they're really serious about pursuing wealth. You're listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We'll be right back.
It's Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And we are here. You've been listening, you've been plugging in, taking notes with the world-renowned doctor, Reverend Doctor, the Right Reverend Dr. Professor, Bishop Dennis. Okay, but Dr. Kimbro, you mentioned something right before we went to break about dress code. And, I'm an old school girl, as is Alfred, although we try not to tell our age. And so I do remember when I first went to work in corporate America, yes, we had to wear suits. There was a dress code there. And that continued over the year. I worked on Wall Street in financial services. And I was listening to you talk about Warren Buffett and his advice to Jay-Z. But here's my question to you, Doc. But has the dress code been canceled when you think about culture in terms of hip hop? When you think about tech, the old ways of dressing and the old standards, Dr. Kimbro, we are seeing they're being canceled because Gen Z is canceling them. Black culture is canceling. And I'm going to say, from Russell Simmons to Jay-Z, some of them really changed the dress code. Russell Simmons never let go of his baseball cap. And now you see Silicon Valley taking notes from Black culture. Help me out here, Alfred. I'll get up on my soapbox. So can you just answer that before we go to the next questions about dress code and some of the old ways of thinking and being challenged and changed because of our culture?
Oh, without a doubt. And I wouldn't say that it's being canceled. To me, it's being adjusted. But there are certain norms and mores that are still entrenched. You mentioned financial services. Okay, one factor that to me hasn't changed. The closer that you get to money, the more conservative thinking, the more conservative the outlook, the more conservative the philosophy, the more conservative the appearance. Why? Because no one wants people to mess with their money. They want to know that it's stable, it's solid, whatever. Now, in terms of the culture, okay, you and I probably know that there are 5 different buying emotions and whatever, and you can close your eyes and just use your ears and just hear the words, and you know who they're after, okay? If you close your eyes and you hear a commercial on TV, or you're watching a commercial on TV and it says, be the envy of the neighborhood, be the first in your community, be the first, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know who they're going after. For the most part, they're going after Rhythm Nation, Black America. Why? Because one of the buying emotions for us is recognition, because we've been thrown under the bus. We've been thrown under the curb. We've been invisible. People don't pay attention to us. We've been pushed aside. If you hear the words, you're safe and secure, here's the stability for the future. Well, who you have the white males, because they want their finances safe. You're in good hands for future generations and the like. Now, yes, you know, we have flipped the script and everything, and it is about Black culture. Indeed, they won't tell you that, but they will take your culture. The war in Ukraine is about culture. That's all it is. Hey, Putin won't tell you that, but he knows he's losing his culture. I tell my students, go on Google right now and Google turn to the war in Ukraine and find an interview. When they're interviewing folks, Ukraine members and Russians, who are member Generation Z, millennials, whatever, they don't need a translator. They speak perfect English. But when they interview folks my age, 71-year-old farts like me, they need a translator. So what does that tell you? Their culture is being pushed aside. Now, how come they don't need a translator? Because of the music and the videos they're watching. That's why they don't need a translator.
Yep.
And you doubt me. One of the YouTube channels that I turn to, and I play my music whenever I'm doing something, ironing, cleaning the house, is called Leonid and Friends. Go to Leonid and Friends on YouTube. This is a Russian and Ukraine music group that plays music from all the other groups note for note. Here is a guy who's a bass player. I want to say he's mid to late 40s, maybe early 50s, and he pulled a music group together. And the only standard that he had in which he brought somebody on, they had to play note for note. No ad-libbing, none. They play Earth, Wind, and Fire. They play Chicago. They play other Black groups and the like, note for note. And don't you know, D, you can close your eyes and they sound better than the original group.
Wow.
They're from Russia and they're from Ukraine. And they meld like so it's all about culture. I remember back in the 60s, if you saw, or actually not 60s, but in the 80s, if you saw, you know, a Black advertiser on TV, well, you know they were going after Black America.
Yeah.
Now, with, you know, with Corona and you got Snoop Doggy Dogg, everybody wants it. I mean, everybody, you couldn't tell who they're after. So it's culture-based. And my only concern, Black America, number one, is called leverage. Now look, damn it, I teach at an HBCU.
Come on, Doc.
I know if I walk 4 miles and take my same skills over to Georgia Tech, and it's not like Georgia Tech has never reached out to me, my salary would more than double. Would more than double.
Yeah.
I had an offer this summer at the PWI out in California, and one of the interviewers even told me during the interview, Dr. Kimbro, man, you know, you come out here, blah, 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 and we have no problem telling you that your salary will probably triple. Triple. But I teach at an HBCU. This is my only demand. We got to leverage that. In my classroom, if you know the buying habits of Black America, I got to stand before some Nike scholars. I got to stand before some Zanata scholars wearing those Zanata shoes and everything. Well, come on, man. Some of my kids got to be there on full ride, do what other races, cultures, and ethnicities do. But we don't do that. Why? Well, we're still stuck on number one. We're still wrapping our minds around this wealth consciousness thing. understand wealth and all the factors, all the intrinsic boxes. Do what other groups are doing. Now, you asked me a question about faith-based.
And wealth, yeah.
People ask me all the time, why did you have those focus groups? And that was the toughest thing, one of the toughest things that I've ever done in my life. I held 6 focus groups for that book. The reason why I wanted focus groups, I just want to be a fly on the wall and sit back and see how these millionaires interact with each other. That's all I wanted to do. Okay, you see a millionaire, but with other non-millionaires. I want to see how they are with their peers. There's no flossing, there's no bling. This all information based and the like. So out of those focus groups, I was able to pull together what I call the calculus of compensation. And there are 9 different drivers of the calculus of compensation. And one of them applies to the question that you asked. And I don't know you're going to ask this question, but let me throw it out there. One of them is, in terms of faith and spirituality, how the have looks at it and how the have not looks at it. So one of the drivers on the calculus of compensation, spirituality, the have not, to praise him, to worship him. But how the have looks at it, the millionaire, yeah, we're going to praise and we're going to worship, but we're going to implement it and put it into practice. So the have not will pick up the Bible and read, oh, I can do all things, with him that blah, blah, blah. But the have will look at it, well, if I can do all things with the help of blah, 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 why not put it into practice? What are we doing sitting here? Let's get this dream and take action on this dream instead of being stifled by it. If you can do everything, hey, let's go ahead and move on. And that which is critical.
That is a whole entire word.
Yeah, if there's only one thing you read, if there's only one aspect in that book that you read, you need to read the calculus of compensation because it'll change your mindset.
No, that is a whole entire word because it's different. I tell people everybody or anybody can believe the word, but it's a whole new level to actually obey.
Without a doubt.
And obeying, doing it.
And I'm not saying that faith is a verb. No, it's even a little bit more than a verb. Faith, it's a verb, but faith is visionary.
Yes.
It's visionary, man.
Yes.
It's telling you exactly, where you're going to be, period. So why would you, if you got to haggle with the price, if you got to haggle about the obstacle, if you got to haggle about the stepstone and the cynicism and all the nonsense and clowns that you got to deal with it, maybe you're not prepared to pay the price. And people ask me all the time, well, Dr. Kimbro, what's the difference between the guy who gets a dream and steps out there and stumbles and then runs back to corporate America and says, man, I can't do this. And the other guy who gets a dream and he's about to lose his car and lose his house and says, take the car, take the house. Well, one guy was afraid of losing his house and afraid of losing his status, but the other guy was afraid of losing his life. And I was at that point. I told my wife, Pat, if I go back to corporate, I'm gonna lose my life. This is because I had read everything. The pieces were fitting. It was just, hey, I tell people sometimes it might take you 7 years, for others it might take me 7 minutes. I don't know. But I remember the day in which I told the universe, get the hell away from me.
And on that note, we're gonna wrap and we'll be right back with Be Lifted Up.
We're back with Be Lifted Up, and we've been with Dr. Dennis Kimbro. Dr. Kimbro, to say you dropped a wealth of knowledge and gems during the course of this show would be an understatement. But where can the Be Lifted Up audience stay in touch with what you're doing and continue to learn from you?
Hey, every form, fashion platform on social media. Hit me up. If you're in the Atlanta area, people ask me, can I come sit in your class? You'd be shocked. The folks are coming in and sit in my class on a daily, weekly basis. So I have no problem with that. Love to hear from you. Send me a DM. Let me know what's going on in your life.
And you're Dr. Dennis Kimbro everywhere on Instagram and other platforms?
Without a doubt. Alfred, it's always great talking to you. D, man, thanks for inviting me. She got her Carolyn Wenger glasses on today.
All right. Listen, you're listening to Be Lifted Up. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Be Lifted Up Radio. That's B letter B, Lifted Up Radio on all social platforms, including Instagram and Twitter. You can listen to this show and other shows on beliftedupradio.com. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with DC Marshall. Thanks for joining us.